It starts quietly, almost too quietly for anyone to notice. You're the child who never slammed doors, never talked back, never caused trouble. You were the easy one, the mature one, the kid every adult trusted because you always did the right thing. But deep down, you know the truth. Somewhere inside you, a small voice whispers, "I was good because I had to be." And maybe that voice has been growing louder lately. Maybe you're starting to wonder what that goodness actually cost you, and why being the good kid never felt as safe as everyone assumed. There's a certain kind of child that adults adore, praise, and unknowingly burden. The child who doesn't complain. The child who learns early how to read the emotional temperature in the room. The child who becomes the quiet fixer, the mediator, the one who holds everything together. The one who becomes the emotional thermostat of the household, adjusting themselves to keep everyone else stable. People call them well-behaved, mature, so responsible for their age. But psychologists have another word for this pattern: parentification, when a child takes on emotional roles that were never meant to be theirs. And often, this isn't because someone tells them to, but because they feel they have no choice. This script isn't about being a naturally kind, gentle kid. This is about the darker, quieter experience of growing up good. The kind of good that isn't freedom, but survival. The kind where you learn to shrink parts of yourself just to make life easier for everyone else. The kind where your heart became a container holding stress, secrets, tension, and unsaid feelings far beyond what any young nervous system was designed to carry. You didn't choose to become the one people trusted. You adapted. Maybe you learned to stay quiet because your home already had too much noise. Maybe you became the listener because the adults around you needed comfort. Maybe you became responsible because chaos terrified you. Maybe you discovered that being good was the safest place to hide. And what's complicated is that, on the outside, this goodness looked admirable. Teachers loved it. Relatives praised it. Strangers smiled at it. Even now, people describe you as reliable, calm, stable, put together. But what they don't see is the invisible weight that formed underneath. They don't see how exhausting it is to constantly be the strong one. They don't see how deeply loneliness can burn when you re the person everyone trusts, but no one truly sees. They don't see how your goodness became a mask, one that slowly fused to your skin. The psychology of being the good kid is rarely talked about, because society assumes that goodness means safety, stability, and emotional health. But many people who grew up this way carry wounds that run deep. Hypervigilance, people-pleasing, a fawn response that lives in the bones, a fear of burdening others, and a buried child inside who never learned what it feels like to be nurtured simply for existing. Today, we're going to take a journey into the dark side of this experience. Not to shame your goodness, but to understand it, to name the pain beneath it, to show you why you've always felt like you had to hold the world together, and why that responsibility was never supposed to be yours. Because once you see the truth, you can finally begin to release it. Every story of the good kid begins long before the child understands what's happening. It starts with an environment where being expressive doesn't feel safe, or where being needy feels like too much. And so, little by little, the child adapts. Imagine yourself young again, 6, 7, maybe 8 years old. The world feels so big, so unpredictable. You look to the adults around you for cues, because that's what children naturally do. But instead of finding steady guidance, you find instability, stress, exhaustion, emotional unpredictability. Adults who are overwhelmed, distracted, hurting, or stretched thin. No one tells you to be quiet. No one tells you to be perfect. But a pattern forms anyway. You notice how quickly tension rises in the air. You notice how tightly your caregiver's jaw clenches. You notice how the smallest inconvenience can set off a storm. You notice how your needs often make things heavier, not lighter. So, you start choosing silence. You start choosing self-sufficiency. You start choosing gentleness. You start choosing the behaviors that keep the peace. This is how hypervigilance begins, not as a warning siren, but as a soft whisper. You learn to read micro-expressions, mood shifts, unspoken emotions. You master the art of scanning the room before you enter, adjusting your presence before anyone asks. You develop a sense of responsibility that feels instinctual. If someone is upset, you step in quietly. If someone is stressed, you make yourself small. If someone is angry, you appease them. If someone is sad, you offer comfort far beyond your years. And slowly, without ever remembering the exact moment, You become the good kid, the kid who never asks for help, the kid who never complains, the kid who never causes problems, the kid who feels older than their body. But underneath that goodness, something sacred begins to wither. The spontaneous, messy, curious, emotional child you were meant to be. Your joy becomes measured. Your needs become negotiable. Your emotions become secondary. Your identity becomes shaped by others' expectations. There's a moment every good kid has it when you realize that being good, Beth, gives you something your nervous system desperately craves. Predictability. Being good means fewer outbursts. Being good means fewer disappointments. Being good means fewer punishments or conflicts. Being good means safety, and safety is addictive when you rarely feel it. Maybe your home was chaotic. Maybe your parents struggled with their mental health. Maybe you lived with someone critical, explosive, or emotionally fragile. Maybe you grew up in poverty, instability, or an environment where everyone was just trying to survive. In places like that, goodness is currency. Goodness is armor. Goodness is camouflage. Goodness is a survival strategy. And what makes this so haunting is that adults genuinely believed they were praising your character. They didn't see that your maturity was built on self-abandonment. They didn't see that your strength was built on fear. They didn't see that your stability was built on suppressing your own chaos, so you wouldn't add to theirs. Somewhere in those early years, the real youth, the messy, emotional, imperfect, beautifully human, you became a shadow self hidden behind a mask of competence. The buried child within you learned to survive by disappearing. But disappearing doesn't erase the pain, it only delays it. And now, as an adult, you're still carrying the echoes of that childhood. In your relationships, your self-worth, your exhaustion, your inability to ask for help, and your constant feeling that you must be the reliable one, even when your own heart is quietly falling apart. There's a particular emotional fingerprint that follows people who grew up as the good kid. It shows up in adulthood, quietly at first through small preferences, tiny behaviors, subtle anxieties, until one day you realize it's shaped your entire personality. And maybe as you hear these signs, something deep inside you will exhale. Finally, someone sees me. You might be the good kid grown up if you feel an almost instinctive pull to hold everyone else together. It's like your nervous system is wired for caretaking, even when no one asks. You anticipate problems before they happen. You feel tension before anyone speaks. You can sense someone's mood from across the room. It's like your empathy has no off switch, because as a child, turning it off was never an option. You might also notice how hard it is to let yourself be messy. Mistakes feel catastrophic. Imperfection feels like danger. When you were young, being good kept the peace. So now, even as an adult, you treat every misstep like a threat to your relationships. You apologize too quickly. You overthink small interactions. You replay conversations in your head at night, wondering if you said something wrong. And there's this pattern you've probably seen in yourself. You minimize your own pain. You tell yourself, it's not that bad, or others have it worse, because somewhere along the way, your feelings became negotiable. You learned to push them down, bury them under logic, or dismiss them entirely. This is self-gaslighting, the quiet voice that convinces you your emotional wounds aren't real. Maybe you struggle with receiving help, not because you're proud, but because vulnerability feels foreign. Being taken care of feels strange. Asking for support feels like you're imposing, like you're becoming the inconvenience you spent your entire childhood trying not to be. You tell people, I'm fine, even when you're exhausted to the bone. Then there's your relationship with boundaries. You want to set them, you really do. But when the moment comes, your throat closes. Saying no feels like you're betraying someone, like you re-choosing yourself in a way that feels morally wrong, even though deep down you know it shouldn't. This is the fawn response, appeasing others to maintain safety. And sometimes, you feel incredibly lonely despite being surrounded by people. Because no matter how much they love you, few of them see how much you're holding. Few of them know how heavy your emotional backpack is. Few of them understand that being the strong one is a role you never auditioned for. It was assigned to you long before you knew you had a choice. There's also a subtle exhaustion that never fully goes away. You can function, you can smile, you can handle everything life throws at you. But underneath, there's a tiredness that feels ancient to fatigue, born from years of emotional labor nobody acknowledged. This is compassion fatigue, the burnout of constantly tending to others while ignoring yourself. Let's talk about relationships. You might find yourself always choosing the emotionally unavailable partner, not because you want to, but because your nervous system is used to working for love. Or maybe you choose people who need fixing, because you don't know what it feels like to be loved without earning it. You show up as the caretaker, the giver, the reliable one, not because it's who you truly are, but because it's who you were trained to be. And then there's the identity piece. People describe you as kind, patient, mature, selfless. But sometimes you look in the mirror and wonder, who am I when I'm not being useful? You struggle to access your own desires because your life has been shaped around what others need. You're good at being who others want you to be, but not always who you actually are. That nagging emptiness, it's the buried child inside you whispering that something important was lost along the way. You might also find yourself over-explaining everything. You justify your feelings. You justify your boundaries. You justify your existence, because being misunderstood feels dangerous. As a good kid, misunderstandings led to conflict, disappointment, or withdrawal. Now, clarity feels like survival. And let's not forget the guilt that hits you when you take a break, the guilt when you rest, the guilt when you choose yourself, the guilt when you aren't available for someone. It's like your internal moral compass is stuck on self-sacrifice, even though that compass was shaped by circumstances, not choice. These signs aren't flaws, they're adaptations. They're the psychological fingerprints of someone who grew up carrying worlds within, someone who learned to be good, not out of joy but out of necessity. And the fact that you're still standing, still compassionate, still trying, that's strength, even if no one saw the cost. Let's step back for a moment and look at the psychology behind all this, because your experience isn't just emotional, it's neurological, it's physiological, it's documented across decades of research. Psychologists have long observed that children who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments often develop what's called hypervigilant. Studies published in journals like Developmental Psychology and the Journal of Personality describe how a child's nervous system adapts by becoming alert to every shift in mood, tone, and expression. This is the brain's way of protecting you by detecting danger before it arrives. And for the good kid, this hyper-awareness becomes embedded into adult life. There's also the concept of locus of control, the belief about whether you can influence what happens around you. Good kids often develop an external locus of control, meaning they believe their worth and safety depend on how others feel. If the adults were upset, you felt responsible. If someone was disappointed, you believed you caused it. This isn't just emotionalis, a cognitive pattern formed through repeated experiences. Neuroscience adds another layer. Mirror neuron research from places like the University of Berkeley shows that children who grow up in high empathy roles develop heightened sensitivity to others' emotions. Your brain literally became wired to feel what others feel. This is why you sense emotional shifts instantly, why you carry others' pain in your body, why compassion fatigue hits you so deeply. Carl Jung's work on the shadow self also applies here. The good kid often exiles parts of themselves, anger, neediness, vulnerability into the shadow, believing these traits are dangerous. But those exiled parts don't disappear. They become internal tension, anxiety, self-doubt. Jung believed healing begins when we retrieve the parts of ourselves we hid to survive. Attachment theory also explains the patterns you've lived with. When parents are emotionally inconsistent, a child often develops an anxious or fawn-based attachment. Your nervous system believed love had to be earned. That being low maintenance made you easier to love. That goodness was currency. Even the exhaustion you feel has a name. Allostatic load, the wear and tear the body experiences after years of managing stress. Good kids often grow into adults with chronically activated stress responses, even in peaceful environments, because your body never learned what true relaxation feels like. None of this means you're broken. It means your brain and body did exactly what they were designed to do: protect you, adapt, survive, make sense of an environment that asked too much of you, too soon. Your patterns are anti-personality flaws that read the legacy of a childhood spent being responsible for things you never should have carried. And now that you understand the science, you're finally ready for the truth beneath it all. Here's the part no one ever talks about. Here's the truth beneath the smiles, the praise, the "you're so mature," the "you're such a good kid." Being good came with a cost your inner child paid quietly, a cost your adult self is still carrying. Because while everyone else saw your goodness as a strength, You felt it as a responsibility, a duty, a mask. What people saw was the calmness, the self-control, the emotional strength. What they didn't see was the silent screaming inside you, the anxiety lodged in your chest, the constant fear that one wrong move would shatter everything, the emotional backpack so heavy you didn't even know you were carrying it, because you had never known anything else. The dark truth is this: you weren't the good kid. You were the stable one, the safe one, the predictable one, the one who held the emotional chaos of others inside your small, fragile body because no one else knew how. You became the container for worries that were not yours. You became the emotional thermostat for adults who never learned to regulate themselves. You became the caretaker of feelings you were too young to understand. You became the responsible one because the alternative, being needy, emotional, or messy, felt dangerous. And now, as an adult, you're still holding those roles without realizing it. You're still the peacemaker. You're still the reliable one. You're still the one others turn to when they fall apart. You're still the one who shows up, even when your own heart is cracking open. What's even darker is this: people love you for the very thing that hurt you. They love your patience, but they don't see the exhaustion behind it. They love your kindness, but they don't notice the suffocating kindness that keeps you from setting boundaries. They love your independence, but they don't know that your hyper-independence was born from learning early that relying on others was not safe. They love your selflessness, but they don't see the buried child inside who never learned how to choose themselves. And then there's the aching loneliness. The loneliness of always being the listener, but never the one who gets listened to. The loneliness of being the strong one in every room you enter. The loneliness of having 1,000 emotional responsibilities, but no emotional sanctuary. The loneliness of being known for what you do for others, but rarely for who you are underneath. You learned to be light for others, even when your own soul felt like a dim room full of hollow silence. You learned to smile because sadness made others uncomfortable. You learned to be predictable because unpredictability led to chaos. You learned to hold your breath emotionally, waiting for everyone else to breathe before you allowed yourself to. But here's the truth you've never been told. You were never meant to be the adult in the room. You were never supposed to be anyone's counselor. You were never meant to carry worlds within while your own world went unprotected. Your goodness was never the problem. The lack of safety was, and the saddest part, you missed a childhood you didn't even know you were missing. But there is another side to this. A softer side, a hopeful side, because once you understand the darkness, you can finally step into the light that was meant for you all along. Healing doesn't mean becoming a different person. Healing means becoming the person you were before the world taught you to disappear. And the path forward doesn't require massive change or dramatic transformation. It begins quietly, just like your childhood wounds did. The first step is permission. Permission to feel, permission to need, permission to rest, permission to stop being the emotional anchor for everyone around you. You don't owe anyone your constant stability. You don't have to be the safe one all the time. You don't have to carry emotions that were never yours to begin with. The next step is reconnecting with the buried child inside you, the child who learned that goodness was the only acceptable identity. Through inner child healing, you gently speak to the parts of yourself you abandoned. You tell them you're allowed to exist. You give that small version of you what they never received: nurturing, compassion, space to feel without judgment. And then comes shadow work. This is where you reclaim the emotions you exiled: anger, sadness, disappointment, desire. These emotions aren't dangerous. They're information. They're pieces of you that were forced into hiding. Carl Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we suppressed don't disappeared. They simply wait to be welcomed back with awareness and love. Another step is learning healthy boundaries, not as walls, but as invitations. An invitation for your heart to be treated gently. An invitation for your energy to be respected. An invitation for your relationships to be reciprocal, not one-sided. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're self-respect. They're the language of someone finally choosing themselves after years of self-abandonment. And finally, healing means shifting your locus of control inward. You are no longer a child whose safety depends on keeping others happy. You are an adult now. You get to decide what you need. You get to honor your own emotions. You get to choose relationships where your goodness isn't exploited, but appreciated. Healing doesn't happen in a day. It happens in moments, small, brave moments where you choose yourself. The first time you say no. The first time you ask for help. The first time you let yourself cry. The first time you rest without guilt. The first time you let someone love you without earning it. Every tiny act of self-kindness becomes a brick in the foundation of your new life, and slowly, you begin to realize something powerful. You were never meant to be good for others. You were meant to be whole for yourself. So here you are, after all these years of being the strong one, the responsible one, the emotionally mature one, and maybe for the first time, you're beginning to see that your goodness wasn't a personality trait. It was a survival strategy, a beautiful one, a painful one, a strategy that kept you alive in environments where your emotional needs weren't fully met. But that chapter is allowed to end now. You're not a child anymore. You don't have to earn love through perfection. You don't have to shrink yourself to keep the peace. You don't have to be the one who holds everything together. You can rest now. You can breathe now. You can take off the mask you've worn for so long. And here's the truth you deserve to hear. You are lovable even when you're tired. You are worthy even when you're not useful. You are deserving even when you're not strong. You are allowed to take up space just by existing. Your childhood may have been shaped by emotional labor, silence, and impossible expectations. But your future, it's shaped by choice, by awareness, by healing, by the slow, gentle reclamation of the parts of you that were left behind. You never truly had a childhood, but you still have a future. And this time, you get to write it.